It all started with a single, harsh kick to a woman who was only trying to protect her dog. And the man who saw it, a man who had witnessed the very worst of human cruelty in the darkest corners of the world, knew in that frozen, silent moment that the world of these two bullies was about to be shattered forever. If you believe in justice, you're going to want to see this story through. Subscribe and join us. The sun was beginning its slow descent over the sleepy town of Cedar Creek, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It was that quiet, liminal hour between the late lunch rush and the early dinner crowd at Maggie's Diner, a classic American establishment with gleaming chrome trim, red vinyl booths, and the lingering, comforting smell of coffee and grilled onions. The diner was a slice of living nostalgia, a place where time seemed to move just a little slower. Inside, the only sounds were the low hum of the refrigerated display case, the gentle clinking of porcelain, and the soft, shuffling footsteps of a young woman named Alara. She moved with a quiet efficiency between the tables, her retro blue waitress uniform crisp despite her long shift. Her name tag, slightly crooked, read Alara. Her eyes, the color of a calm sea, held a gentle tiredness, but they also held a deep, unwavering kindness. To the few customers scattered in the booths, she was just the sweet, hard-working waitress. They didn't know her story. They didn't know that the small, makeshift bed she'd fashioned from an old towel behind the counter was for the most important thing in her life. Tucked safely in that nook was Kaiser, a German shepherd puppy of only 10 weeks. He was all oversized paws, floppy ears, and a curious, wet nose. His coat was a soft blend of blacks and tans, and his eyes held that innocent, trusting gaze unique to puppies. Alara had found him abandoned near the dumpster out back a month ago, shivering and alone. She'd taken him in, named him after her grandfather, and he'd become her shadow, her confidant, her little piece of joy in a life that had demanded more than its fair share of resilience. She was saving every spare penny, dreaming of a small apartment that allowed pets, of a life where she and Kaiser could have a real home. For now, the diner was their sanctuary, and Maggie, the elderly owner, had reluctantly agreed to let Kaiser stay, so long as he stayed out of sight and out of trouble. He was a good boy, sleeping most of the time, or quietly chewing on a toy Alara had bought him. Sitting at the far end of the counter, nursing a black coffee, was a man who seemed carved from granite. He was dressed in the crisp, sharp lines of a Navy SEAL service uniform, the trident pin gleaming on his chest. His name was Master Chief Finn Corrigan. He was a man of few words and immense stillness. His posture was perfect but not stiff. It was the relaxed readiness of a predator who knew his own strength. His hands, wrapped around the warm mug, were crisscrossed with scars and calluses that told silent stories of ropes, rifles, and hardship. His eyes, a piercing, cool blue, scanned the room not with paranoia, but with a practiced, analytical calm. He was on leave driving cross-country to visit family he hadn't seen in over a year, and he'd stopped at Maggie's on a whim, drawn by its old-fashioned charm. He'd watched Alara work. He saw the gentle way she interacted with her customers, the extra moment she took with an elderly regular, the way her face would light up with a genuine smile when she glanced back at the hidden puppy. He saw a good person, and in his line of work, you learned to recognize that quickly. He left a generous tip under his saucer, a silent acknowledgement of her hard work. The peace was shattered by the roar of a souped-up engine and the slam of two-car doors. A moment later, the diner's bell jangled aggressively as two young men swaggered in. They were clad in matching varsity jackets from a local college, their letterman patches screaming of athletic privilege. The taller one, Brad, had a smug, entitled smirk plastered on his face. His companion, Chad, was broader, with a brutish confidence that came from a lifetime of being the biggest guy in the room. They flopped noisily into a booth, their loud voices and boisterous laughter immediately disrupting the diner's tranquil atmosphere. Alara's shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly, but she pasted on her professional smile and approached their table with notepad in hand. "What can I get for you gentlemen today?" she asked, her voice steady. They ignored her, continuing their loud conversation about a party. After a long, dismissive moment, Brad finally looked her up and down. "2 burgers. Well done, and make it quick, sweetheart, we got places to be." His tone was dripping with condescension. Alara simply nodded, wrote down the order, and turned to leave. It was then that a tiny, curious whimper came from behind the counter. Kaiser, stirred by the loud noises, had poked his little head out to see what was happening. His ears were perked, his head tilted in puppy curiosity. Well, what do we have here? Chad sneered, leaning out of the booth. The help bringing her mutt to work. That's a health code violation, isn't it, Brad? Brad laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Probably infested with fleas. Looks like a little rat. A flush of anxiety crept up Alara's neck. He's no trouble, he stays back here. I'll just get him settled. Her voice was tight as she moved quickly to intercept, but the damage was done. The bullies had found a target. As she knelt to gently guide Kaiser back to his bed, the puppy, intrigued by the new voices, took a few wobbly steps out from behind the counter. It was an innocent, exploratory move. But to Brad and Chad, it was an invitation. Brad slid out of the booth and took a menacing step forward. I don't like dogs, he said, his voice low and threatening. Especially ugly ones. Please, Alara said, her voice shaking now. He's just a puppy. He's not bothering anyone. She moved to stand between Brad and Kaiser, her arms slightly spread in a protective gesture. From his seat at the counter, Finn Corrigan didn't move a muscle. But his coffee mug was now still in his hand, his focus entirely on the scene unfolding behind him, which he watched in the reflection of the chrome napkin dispenser. His breathing remained even, but his eyes had changed. The calm blue had hardened into the color of glacial ice. He was assessing, calculating, his mind running through scenarios with the cold, detached efficiency of a tactical supercomputer. He saw the power imbalance, the aggression, the fear. He was a storm contained within a single still man. Chad joined his friend, the two of them now looming over Alara. You need to control your animal, Chad spat. Alara, her heart hammering against her ribs, bent down to scoop up Kaiser. But as she did, Brad made a sudden, fake lunge forward, stomping his foot hard on the linoleum floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the tense space. Kaiser, terrified, yelped and scrambled backwards, slipping from Alara's grasp. The puppy, panicked, tried to run back to the safety of his nook, but instead darted towards the bully's legs. What happened next seemed to unfold in brutal, slow motion. As Kaiser scurried past Chad's heavy work boots, Chad, with a cruel, deliberate smirk, drew back his leg. Stupid mutt. He grunted, and he kicked out. It wasn't a full force kick, not from a man his size, but it was enough. The toe of his boot connected solidly with the puppy's small rib cage. A high-pitched, pained yelp sliced through the air, a sound of pure, uncomprehending agony. Kaiser was sent tumbling sideways, skidding across the floor, where he lay whimpering and shaking. A sound tore from Alara's throat, a raw, guttural cry of maternal fury and despair. She didn't think. She launched herself towards her puppy, throwing her body over his tiny, trembling form. She was on her knees, her back to the bullies, using her own body as a human shield. No, leave him alone! She screamed, her voice cracking with tears. Brad laughed. Oh, look at that. The little waitress thinks she's a hero. He took a step closer and, with a contemptuous flick of his foot, he kicked her. Not hard enough to cause serious injury, but hard enough to jar her, to send a shock of pain and humiliation through her body. He kicked her exactly where she was trying to protect her dog. Get up. You're embarrassing yourself. That was the trigger. The final, unforgivable line. The scrape of a stool leg against the linoleum was the only warning. It was a soft sound, but it carried a finality that silenced everything. Finn Corrigan was now standing. He didn't stand up quickly or with anger. He rose with a slow, inexorable, terrifying grace. It was the motion of a battleship turning its guns. Every ounce of the relaxed stillness was gone, replaced by a focused, radiating energy that seemed to drop the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His movement alone was a declaration of war. He turned and began to walk towards the booth. His steps were not rushed. They were measured, deliberate, and heavy with intent. The few other customers in the diner froze, their forks halfway to their mouths. The air grew thick, charged with a terrifying electricity. Brad and Chad, sensing the shift, turned their attention from the cowering waitress to the man now approaching them. They saw the uniform, and for a split second, a flicker of uncertainty crossed their faces. But their arrogance, a fortress built on a lifetime of never facing real consequences, quickly reasserted itself. Whoa. Easy there, soldier, Brad said, puffing out his chest. This doesn't concern you. We're just having a little chat with the waitress here. Finn stopped a few feet away, his hands hanging loosely at his sides. His gaze swept over the two of them, and it was not a look of anger. It was a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. It was the look a man gives a venomous insect before he crushes it. He finally spoke, his voice a low, calm rumble that vibrated in the bones of everyone who heard it. You have 3 seconds to apologize to the woman and the dog, and then you will pay your bill and leave. Chad snorted, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with his friend. Or what, old man? You gonna call your commander? This is a civilian matter. Why don't you run along and play with your toy gun? The word 3 never left Finn's lips. Instead, he moved. It was not a movement any of them could have anticipated. It was too fast, too efficient, too brutally clinical. As Chad took that step forward, Finn's left hand shot out not in a punch, but